Hey guys, Chelsea here from Making Manzanita, and today we're going to teach you how to build this tool organizer for the Kreg router table that looks like this. Guys, look at this mess. First of all, super dusty out here. We need to get cleaned up. But what I'm specifically talking about is this huge pile of tools we have in our Kreg clamp table. So this is kind of where we try to keep everything corralled for all of our awesome tools that we get from Kreg. But we're needing a little bit of organization because things are just stacking up on each other. So we are teaming up with Kreg to build a custom storage container or shelves. I don't know what you want to call it, a storage rack for underneath the clamp table. So it's gonna go down here where you see all these tools stacked up. We're making it with particle board, just some leftover scrap we have in our workshop. And it's gonna fit all of those tools perfectly. So we started out by cutting down the straight edges of the particle board on our table saw, and we used a trim blade for that. But we didn't have a trim blade for our circular saw, and we needed the circular saw to cut the diagonal pieces. So here is kind of how we set it up to prevent any wood chips, which is very common when you're cutting particle board. You always need to be sure you're using a fine-tooth trim blade. And like I said, we didn't have that for the circular saw, so this is what we did. We set up those two, the clamp there, and we lined it up so that we'd be able to run the circular saw along the clamp as kind of our guide. And then we used a scrap piece of particle board called a sacrifice piece for the top. And that sacrifice piece takes all of the chipping from that blade that is not a trim blade. And then we have painter's tape on the bottom piece where the actual cut is taking place. And you can see here, there's quite a big difference in that top piece and the bottom piece once you peel it all back. Once we've peeled that painter's tape off there, that cut is nice and smooth, whereas that sacrifice piece that we're cutting that was laying on top has a bunch of chips in it. And Logan was explaining to me kind of everything that goes into this decision on how to use the sacrifice piece and what the trim blade means. And so I kind of stopped mid-conversation, and here's a little inside look at our conversation as he explains it. Okay, so this is a trim blade.
Trim blade or polished blade. Okay. This was to cut at a 220 sanded finish. Blah, blah, blah. It has 90 teeth. That's all you care about. 90 teeth. This is a rip blade. It has 40 teeth. You don't really care about the finish. You just want it straight. And because this has these gaps, when you're cutting particle board, like this, it beats on the wood. So
same thing for like plywood, right?
Yeah, so when it's ripping, it's chipping the corners out because there's these gaps. Because it's just, I don't know, there's a little gap there. Whereas this is a 90 teeth, there's not as many gaps, it's a cleaner, more consistent cut, and that's how you get this straight cut.
So when you're cutting the particle board with the table saw, you had this in the table saw, and that's why you didn't need to worry about putting tape on it, because this gives you a cleaner cut.
Yeah, it's a trim blade.
But the blade you had in the circular saw when you were cutting this diagonal,
it's a rip blade like this.
Is a rip blade with the bigger gaps here. So that's why we had to do this piece.
Sacrifice
piece. And the painter's tape to get the clean cut.
I do tape, and you do, this is why, I mean, it's just called a sacrifice piece because you sacrifice it to the chips.
And why couldn't we just put a blade in here that has finer teeth? You don't have one this size?
Yeah, they just cost so much money.
Okay. And the same thing, same concepts for
they make trim
plywood,
blades for,
right? If you're cutting plywood.
Plywood, you just use this. You just use this rip blade. It doesn't really matter.
Okay.
The particle board, because all these little things can chip out, like these little pieces. You know, like this.
Yeah.
You know, that piece, it's just, you just have to use a blade like this. Same thing with MDF, because it's all glued together.
And why would you ever want to use this? What's the benefit of using this if it chips out? Does it go faster or something? Is it faster cut?
This costs like a third of what this blade costs. This is like a $100 blade right here. This is like 30. So when this dulls, you just go buy a new one. You don't want to dull this one out because they cost a lot of money.
So you only want to use this one when you really care about the
finish. The
finish
yeah.
being nice. Okay.
Being super straight and clean.
Okay. Next, it was time to do the dado cut for the shelf. A dado joinery is where you make a channel in one of the pieces of wood using a table saw, and then the shelf sits inside that channel. So in order to do this, you're gonna need a table saw, and then you take the panels and you mark where your dado cut is going to be, and then you run the board through the table saw multiple times, slightly moving the table saw guide each time. So each time you move it through, you're going to be cutting off just a saw blade width at a time until you finish the dado cut. So you want to be sure that dado cut is no larger than 3/4 inches, and make sure you just have a scrap piece of particle board so that you can be testing it as you go, because you want that shelf to be nice and tight in your dado channel. So you can see here Logan's doing 2 at the same time, so he's running each board through twice and then moving the table saw fence over each time until that shelf fits nice and perfect as shown there. And then after you're all done with that, you can move on to the pocket holes. And I didn't mention it in the beginning, but we have the woodworking plans available for this whole tool organizer over on Kreg's website for free, and you can download those just by clicking the link in the description. So in the woodworking plans, we have the exact locations of where you should drill all of these pocket holes, so that's kind of handy. Here we are using the Kreg 720 Pro pocket hole jig, which we absolutely love. We have a full video tutorial on how to use it, how to set it up, all the cool tricks for it, but it's super handy. I love the Automax clamping system, which that clamp, when it closes down on the piece of wood, you don't have to set that material thickness every time like you had to do on the older models of the Kreg jig. So definitely love this newer version, which was released in 2021. All right, so after you get everything all drilled, everything's cut, now it's time to assemble. So what we did is we started by putting the bottom panel inside the Kreg table stand, and we just set it on top of the blue ledge that is already there. Next, you put the back piece in, and you can adjust the back piece is where your dividers are going to be attached to. And then we put the 2 side panels in, and then there's 2 middle divider panels as well. So one of the last things we had to do was actually detach one of the legs of the cart because it was blocking the shelf that we needed to attach. So to do that, it was pretty easy. We just used a crescent wrench to undo it, get everything assembled, and then we put that leg back on. So one of the things we decided to add kind of after we got it all assembled and I started taking a look at how we were going to get everything organized is we added these hooks on one of the edges, the edge that has the full side panel. And I'm so glad we did that because we were able to hang some stuff from it. All right, here's a closer look of everything that we were able to fit in our storage rack. There was so much. So first we have the crosscut cutting station in the box. And then I have some clear bins that were able to hold some of the smaller things. We have here the extra large pocket hole jig, which is great when you need it for 4x4s. And then we also have a micro jig that clamps into the pocket hole jig, a micro one to make smaller pocket holes. And then these project blocks are so handy for keeping your project up while you're staining it or painting it off of the surface. So I have 4 of those in there. And then we've got, it looks like the multi-mark deep in there, one of the vacuum clamps to hook up your shop vac. And then I think we've got 4 boxes there of pocket hole plugs. It's always nice to keep a few boxes of those on hand so you have them when you need them, of course. And then moving on to the next box, we were able to fit in this one the new cabinet door mounting jig. We haven't had a chance to use it, but I'm so excited about it. And then the shelf pin jig for drilling shelf pins. And then the rest of that extra large pocket hole jig is also in there with some screws. And then this is our 320, which is just kind of a smaller, more portable pocket hole jig, which is great if you're on the go. It's in that package, that gray box there. And then We always have to have lots of pocket hole screws on hand. So we've got, I think, two small boxes, 2 big boxes of screws. And then of course our 720 Pro, which we use all the time. And then there's also like a portable cross cut back there. So here's what it looks like once it was all put in this clamp table, which this clamp table, I absolutely love it. So it's also called a router table. So it's very, it is very versatile. So this tool stand that everything sits on could be used on your router table, or it could be used on your clamp table. So we have the tool stand being used on our clamp table because we have our router somewhere else in our workshop, but we use this clamp table all the time. It's great when you're assembling face frames. You can clamp everything down. Everything can be nice and squared up, and those clamps slide, as you can see there. So you can clamp everything down, and it's a nice, clean, flat surface to work on when you're assembling. And then I also love these 90-degree clamps that we have from Kreg. Those are actually going to be hung on the edge there along with that panel carrier, which that panel carrier is so handy when you need it for picking up drywall or plywood. So that's everything that's going to fit into the tool organizer. There's a ton of tools there, so let's get it all organized here. This was kind of the fun part, figuring out how it all worked and fit together and how it looks. It's amazing. I'm so surprised we were able to fit so many tools in there. So those 3 hooks were so handy. We have our panel carrier and then 2 90-degree corner clamps there. Those clear bends came in handy for rounding up some of the smaller pieces of the accessories and the jigs and smaller boxes. And then the shelf is great for just sliding in some of the boxes of the smaller tools. And then of course the project kit, which has all the pocket hole jigs. That middle area is perfect width for the 720, and then the other cross-cutting station fits over there on the right and then has plenty of room for another clear bend sitting on top of it. And those clear bends were purchased on Amazon. So if you want to download something or download the woodworking plans to build this yourself, feel free to do that. It's in the video description below. And then also I'm including all of the links for the tools I mentioned and those clear bends so you can purchase them as well. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to let us know. You can give it a thumbs up, you can leave us a comment, and then while you're here, you can push our button, our picture here of our pretty little faces to subscribe to our channel, and then you can watch this video next. I think you will love it. Be sure to check us out next week. We'll be back with another DIY and renovating video. Bye guys.